Welcome to Platemark, Series 2, A History of Western Printmaking with me, Anne Shafer, and my buddy,
Tru Ludwig.
Yay! We are continuing on in the Italian zone. Today we're going to do Italy and engraving mostly.
Yeah, things that are done to copper.
Copper, good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Largely engraving.
All right, before we do that, we have to do our thing.
Hi, I'll go first this time.
Alrighty.
I'm Tru Ludwig. I identify as a gay, white, trans man, and I use he, him pronouns. We're recording this on the Purple Crayon Press, which is housed in Baltimore, which is the land of the Piscataway Conoy people.
Well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I identify as a cis het white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. All right, so
Always have, always will.
Yes, I believe that is true.
Not like some of us.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a small break, and then we're going to get rolling.
We just finished talking about the Venetians in terms of woodcut, and I got to regale you with my deep love of the Vesalius on the fabric of the human body, and how virtually all artists were trying to find their way in rendering the human form more believable, knowing what was under the surface. But the other thing was about the Venetian sense of composition and a different sensitivity to color and the way compositions are laid out in these dynamic moving forms. And I couldn't go anywhere without mentioning Domenico Campagnola, who was working in the Venetian area. He was the adopted son of Giuliano Campagnola, which you can always look him up. He does important stuff. They're very stipply nudes and whatnot.
Oh, right. I remember those.
Yeah.
Weird.
Well, yeah, So, and since we didn't have any at the museum that I knew of, we're just going right over that. But we're going to talk briefly about his adopted son, Domenico, who actually spent a fair amount of time working with and around Titian. So there's a lot of overlap there, particularly in terms of, and he may actually have also worked on some of those Vesalius images as well. Some of the others that aren't the muscle men that we can say belong to the circle of Titian. But I wanted to bring to your attention the Battle of the Nude Men. In some places you'll see it written as the Battle of the Naked Men, but as we know,
yes,
they're not naked. They know they're nude.
Right.
They're not embarrassed. Besides, they're in battle. They have a lot more important things to think about than the fact that they're not wearing clothing. What I want to do is bring to your attention this engraving, which is almost completely square, but it has this stirred pot. It's interesting how it almost predicts some of the peculiar centrifugal force that you might expect in a Mannerist composition. I would find it hard to say that that isn't something that could have been absorbed a bit from Venice, just because their compositions are far more dynamic. But I had to bring this to your attention so that you could be aware of how, well, contorted, shall we say. There's a lot more light and dark contrast. It would be delicious to compare this Venetian Battle of the Nude Men with the Florentine Battle of the Nude Men by Palaiuolo. And I think right there, bam, you'd be able to see the difference between that very intellectual way of looking at the body and this far more theatrical, almost momentary movement of the body as these fighters really bash away at each other.
But they're years apart, right?
Oh, quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right. So the 10 Nude Men is 1475.
Okay.
But honestly, I don't think that's the crux of it. I want you to take a good hard look at some of these backs and bums because there's a little trouble.
This is the Campagnola, by the way, is 1517.
Yes.
Well, several things always struck me about this print. One, it's not very big. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole hell of a lot going on.
Like a lot.
Like you can't, it's almost hard to get in it because there's so much.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's a full composition, there's also not a lot of resting place, which is appropriate because it's a battle.
Right.
But it does make it hard for the viewer to get in. Like you go to that horse sort of, and then I kind of get lost. I don't know.
The only other three places you can look, okay, there's the big horse in the middle.
Right.
There's a horse's bum and a horse's bum and the tail of that other horse. Those are essentially the only resting sites because they're the largest, simplest forms are the bums.
Right.
But the nude men that are all going at it, it's just really difficult. But then you look at them and they are almost écorché as well. but not quite. Okay, there is a dog barking
I
down
know,
the
but
corner.
he's almost écorché too.
Yeah, it's just,
And by écorché, we mean
stripped of the surface skin,
yeah.
as in, let's say, St. Bartholomew was flayed, and so they'd skinned him alive. That's why you see him with his attribute of his knife, as he's depicted by Michelangelo in The Last Judgment, which I'll refer to in a moment, on the Sistine Chapel wall. But these écorché figures, maybe he's aware of the Palaiuolo. It's almost impossible to believe that he isn't. And it's as though, this sense of where absolutely every muscle is tensed on the Palaiuolo. Here, at least, it seems like they're not every single muscle is tensed. They seem to be slightly more in motion. In fact, it's almost like, guys, simmer down. You're never going to get any killing done because they're just so. Blah, 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 blah. It's just, it's sort of like watching a group of guppies swim. I don't know where that came from, but it is. Well, it is, isn't
perfect.
it? Can you see it? Or starlings, It's like, like a murmuration of starlings. Right. It just keeps. There's nothing. That's a typical. Yeah, okay, it's really fun. Anna's turning red, but I was seeing these little fishy forms, but okay. And if we were at the museum and if we had one of these, I would have seen it upside down.
We did. We showed that.
We did.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember showing it. Maybe early on. I think, but not often. And then I cut it.
Yeah, you did cut it at some point.
I got mad at him. I don't know why.
Oh,
I think
funny.
I think it annoyed me so much. But that goes back to the why don't we dig deeper? And this is the part about the history of prints that was hard. It was always Sophie's choice in a way. Well, of course, Anne spoiled me rotten. It gave me everything.
I did spoil you rotten, and it was time constraint. We
couldn't show them absolutely.
I mean, we've done the same amount of lecturing, and we're in 15-17, and you in school you would have been done with the semester already. Think about that. It's delightful to be able to deep dive.
If we were looking at this in the museum, I would probably be seeing it from upside down, and so I'm rotating the book, and then you would say it's still just it's still a completely ridiculous composition, so full as a battle scene should be. It actually almost reads better upside down.
I can't see what's going on.
Well, it's still incomprehensible. So these guppies are all swimming around in a 9 by 9 inch composition. That's teeny weeny.
It is teeny weeny.
And I'm writing 9 by 9 inches in my book for some reason. If I
ever next time,
yeah, because in the book we're looking at, it's maybe 6 by 6 cheapers. That's just that big. Students wouldn't have been able. It would be just.
And why? It's a lot to pack into a 9 by 9 inch composition.
Well, and then you have to wonder. All right, it's an exciting image. How much was the copper? Who's he working for? Was he doing it for himself? Right. Was he trying to show off? Was it an entrance piece for something? Suddenly, I realized that this guy's thigh is way shorter than his other thigh, and it's troubling.
Under the dog, lower left, there's a sheet of paper laying on the ground that says Domenico Campagnola 1517, but it doesn't say after somebody, and it doesn't say cum privilege or anything.
It is autographic.
It's autographic,
and that's why I think it's fun to see that. And it's really fun to see it blown up. It's not nearly as annoying.
Exactly, it's kind of great line work.
It is. It's really extraordinary, really, but it's
swirl. Weird.
It's a total mess. Oh, but he's also playing with the stipple that he learned from his stepdad.
Oh, right.
Which is interesting. Yeah. On that, that horse's neck is a real problem.
But it's super autographic. Look at that.
Oh, entirely, yeah. And that's why they must have included it. It's just a real pity that it's so small.
Right. It's better blown up, people. Go on the web.
Well, can't you just give it to them, man?
I can put it in the show notes with a link.
Because you're so nice.
I am.
I wanted to bring that to our attention just in terms of that Venetian sense of drama, diagonals, yada, yada, yada. And, as we just said, we probably think that was more done for himself and as a learning piece than anything else. The next thing I would mention would be, let's say, the Venetian idea of colored papers. Right. And we had a really nice impression of the Master of the Die's Transfiguration at the Baltimore Museum of Art, which we would pull out. And, you remember, Anne, you pull it out and they all go, "Oh!" Why? Because it was on paper that wasn't creamy or white, you know. And but it's a really successful transcription of another artist's work, as one would expect. There's a whole
Well,
lot.
I'm kind of fascinating because the one at the Met is not on colored paper, or the color has faded so badly that it's now not reading as colored paper.
Well, that's odd because doesn't it look better in the blue? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a transfiguration after Raphael. Now, Raphael has been dead for 10 years by the time he does this. It's a proof on blue paper is ours, but I still think it's just fascinating to see that happen. And it's a very Raphael kind of composition, distinction between heaven and the earthly realm, and Christ has been turned into light, and off he goes. And you can definitely sense the Raphael kinds of structural figures. But we wanted to bring that to your attention simply because it's got some of these Venetian ways of making marks. It doesn't have that stiffness that you would see in a Marcantonio Raimondi. I'm also delighted to see, I think that would be in Venet, wouldn't you?
I'm seeing R there.
Yeah, for Raphael and Venet, yeah. But then the master of the die should be hiding in there somewhere. That guy's hair is a little weird.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know, it's a weird, it's a staid composition somehow.
Well, it's because it's Raphael. I mean, look how stiff we're flying, but we're not moving.
Yes.
Yeah, we're flying, but we're not. And I think that blue paper was one of the reasons that
it works better.
It just does. It's not to say that artists weren't already starting to experiment with various kinds of printmaking, but also the different kinds of function of prints as we move towards the middle of the 1500s and on into the later part. Of course, engraving is really going to be the way. Etching, we see a tentative but masterful start with the Parmigianino entombment from about 1517. But engraving is still the thing that we're seeing most of. And the one that we enjoyed pulling out for the students was a portrait of Cosimo de' Medici in full armor. And that was made by Nicola della Casa. Now, we enjoyed showing this to the students for several reasons. It's fun to see this, I think, because it's
telling, very telling.
Our title would be Cosimo Medici as Hercules. It tells us, number one, that they're back.
Right. Where had they gone?
Well,
they ran for it.
They had been driven out of Florence, but now they're back. And here's Cosimo de' Medici looking pretty darn proud of himself as he is now back in power as the kingpin. He has now become the Duke of Florence. And this print was done about 1544. So, after a painting by Baccio Bandinelli, and it was commissioned by none other than Cosimo de' Medici.
How
so
humble.
Yes, of course. So, for instance, make a painting of me. Now immortalize me. Okay, now let's make an engraving of me so that it can be printed and we can send it all throughout everything and everybody can see how incredibly important I am and how powerful I have become. How, Annim, has he managed to get them to realize just how powerful he has become?
Well, he's dressed well. Hercules didn't wear that, but he's in the guise of Hercules somehow.
Well, he is, but here he's wearing. Look at his armor, because this takes us back to how engraving was invented in a way, right? And if you zoom in on that armor, you're going to see the labors of Hercules all over the armor.
So the storytelling is in the armor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very elaborate armor, and he's got accoutrement, like the helmet next to him is kind of nutso with the plume on the top and the shield and the quivers down on the left.
You see, it's the Perseus. Yeah,
he's got more quivers up here.
Yeah, he's also got the face of Medusa on his shield. So we're quoting mythology and showing how frickin' important we are. And yes, you're circling over the part that this helps us know this is Cosimo Medici of Florence, Duke. But it is the escutcheon is on the lion skin.
It's a lion's. Oh, look at the feet and the bones.
Oh, yeah, and the poor tail. I'm sorry, lion.
God.
And so like
look at how tiny the Baccio Bandinelli bit is over here.
Well, I mean, at least he stuck it in there.
He did stick it.
It's a little cartouche. Like, you think it's as a piece of paper on the wall behind him?
Maybe.
But there's things about this engraving that are really quite remarkable and maybe just a bit troubling. First of all, the portrait is, I'm sure, a very serviceable portrait. And I mean that it's serviceable.
That's really generous.
Well, this guy's head kind of got stuck on.
So flat.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he got it stuck on a real flat piece of armor that's just so busily covered with all these different labors of Hercules. My favorite part, and actually you can see, especially on the thigh, the front of the thighs, you can see two labors very clearly.
Right.
But I really am all about the kneecaps. Check those kneecaps out.
Are those scarabs?
I think they're like animals with horns.
Oh,
like rams. They're pretty scary. I honestly don't know how he would have been able to move around with those kneecaps.
Well, but the hand with the staff is pretty great, though.
Okay.
The fingers and the
all right.
Hands are hard, right?
But I'm going to tell you, the hand behind, on his akimbo, that's
not so good.
It's kind of terrifying.
Well, there's a lot of tasty stuff in here, and if there was a better face, I think it would be a fantastic thing.
Better face.
Yeah, better face.
Actually, there's probably a portrait that's almost without a doubt very accurate.
Right.
Maybe making him look a little younger, but here he is, the part that, the lion skin with his name, just trumpeting his power is, I think, quite telling. Now, that's an adept engraver after a portrait, but yeah, there's a really great Bronzino portrait of Cosimo that meaning that the portrait is fairly accurate.
Yeah.
But
this looks totally like almost a direct copy of the face of this portrait because he's looking aside.
Yeah.
3/4 view.
So it's telling you, but somehow in this engraving, it's just not happening. That's so a Bronzino. We'll get to
right.
Okay. Also, I'm going to have to mention that Cosimo's codpiece is
tiny.
Thank you. But he's a man of power, to be sure. He's got the whole Herculean thing going on. Well, so, it tells us that there's this market, the idea that you can be using prints as propaganda, spread power, to show the Medicis are back in Florence. But Nicola della Casa is also not just showing power, but he's also giving something to the people that they probably want. Because just this morning when I was going through my fabulous Titian, the enormous woodcut catalog,
right,
I found this Nicola della Casa after Michelangelo's Last Judgment.
Oh, God.
And it's really quite fascinating. It's 11 plates, and it's probably done about 1545, which means that was like the minute that Michelangelo finished it.
Oh, right.
There it is. And
there it is.
And it's 11 plates. And, the Last Judgment on the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel is such a peculiar, massive painting. I think it trumpets an unusual time in art as the beginning point of the Mannerist era. Nicola della Casa is completely seeming to embrace that kind of concept with the horror vacui, with the unstable compositions. You can see it in the portrait of Medici, but you can even see it in the way that he's handling how do you translate a massive fresco that's 60 feet tall to, an engraving made out of 11 plates.
So it's 11 plates and it's 5 feet tall. So it's big.
Let's say that the center image perhaps is 30 by 20. It's interesting to see how he's had to get us, how do you divide the plates up and join them to make this composition? And you can really you can't blame him for what he's come up with. He had to.
Things are offset. It's weird.
Well, kind of.
Because compositionally he doesn't want to break up that figural group.
Very good. Right. Very, very good. There's the River Styx, and there's the
lower right.
Lower right is the corner where there was a person that Michelangelo disliked intently and portrayed in the group that are being sent to hell with a serpent wrapped around him biting his male member.
Who was that?
It was the master of ceremonies, who was very condescending, and Michelangelo just thought he was a pompous ass. So he literally showed him as an ass. He gave this, I've forgotten the guy's name right now, but Cesano. Yeah, it was Cesano. At any rate, he gave him donkey ears and has him all nude there, but with a Laocoon-esque snake wrapped around his body, but chomp! Right as you go under the door through to hell. And it's with the whole gaggle that's going to be going into the maw of hell on the lower right-hand corner.
Right.
He's done a reasonably decent transcription of these figures, the folks that are on the left-hand side of Christ. There's the largest assortment of backs and butts, and it's a very difficult image, but
it's like William Blakey over in this cavern of hell.
Yeah, and it's really quite a surprise.
Yeah, or a little Bosch, Hieronymous Bosch.
What is that guy? I've never seen him in there.
We're in the lower left now.
Yeah, it does look very Boschian.
Yeah.
Can you scroll up to the middle of the top where you rightfully pointed out that it looks like he offset the figures of Christ so that he didn't bisect them.
Right.
And that so the figures in the circle of the elect in heaven are kind of munged up. They're not lining up. They don't balance equally on the scales like they would in the actual. But what a nightmare to have to come up with a way to solve that, At any rate, Nicola della Casa obviously got some work, and engraving is the mode. In this case, we would call this a reproductive print.
Mm-hmm.
We can see this desire for reproductive prints, propaganda, so on and so forth. And honestly, I was discussing with Anne, I'm thinking that maybe we end up doing even larger discussion of reproductive prints as they become so incredibly prominent, and it's such an important part in the history of prints. It's easy in one respect to overlook them because we keep thinking authenticity. It has to be made by the artist. Who's the author of it? Where's the idea coming from? But you can see that Titian, Rubens, just all kind of Montaigne. Some of them are autographic. Some of them are Parmigianino, handing them off to people because they know that there's a market for it. And so I think reproductive prints, it's certainly in Holtz, they kind of get their own chapter. My sense is that they're looked at in lower status than original prints, but they are original prints, and they are made by artists who are able to convert, in this case, Nicola della Casa, a 60-foot tall fresco on the Pope's chapel wall into 11 separate plates that line up and get printed on a very, very large format, large sheets of paper. That's impressive. Understanding just how incredibly important these reproductive prints, they're absolutely essential. If we look at what happens in the entirety of the 16th century, it's that this hunger in the North for this interest in what's been going on in Italian art. That's one of the reasons why we get artists like Giorgio Ghisi, who was hired up to go to Antwerp. And so it's, let's think about, why would you have a reproductive print? What does a reproductive print do?
Well, you could think of it from several angles. One, it puts your stamp on your design, right? Absolutely. For other artists, so that they know they're borrowing from you, right? If they do.
Your disegno, your invenzione, like Raphael.
Right, like I'm the guy. Mm-hmm. And also, the multiplicity part is so that you, me, I can own something that relates either to something in the church or some hero or some philosopher, or that there's a personal connection with high culture. And by, let's say, 1517, Raphael's pretty well known. So if you're the guy, Marcantonio Raimondi, that gets to be Raphael's engraver, you're flexing too. Right? And you're probably set for life.
Absolutely. It's establishing the printmaker's reputation, right? And that they're the truthful, authoritative artist. That's the choice of Raphael, is to have Marcantonio Raimondi do it. This is the
authorized,
right? The authorized biography of Elvis. Right. It would promote the artist's oeuvre, but it could also promote the collector that says, I've collected all of the engravings after Raphael's drawings. The patron. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I'm all that. And of course, as you say, the public could, wait, I'm never going to get to, the Pope's never going to let me into his chapel. Right. But it's like, how would you, the public, be able to take it home? This is your postcard, your poster. I saw this exhibition at the Met. So you could get that. And so you get to enjoy that artwork vicariously, even if it's in black and white. If it's beautifully done and it gets across the sense of color and light and shadow, then you've really legitimized a whole lot of things with that. And so,
are there records of how much these things cost?
I think we could probably find it out. certainly with Giorgio Ghisi goes up working for Hieronymous Cock. There have to be wonderful records there.
Yeah.
In the various publishing houses. So the point here in the 16th century is that the print stops being just a singular craftsperson's thing or just an artist doing a thing. And it becomes this thing that involves, let's say, production line, if you will. We talked before about the Heiser, the person that in early printmaking, the person that designs it. In this case, let's say it's Michelangelo. Let's say then that the person that reproduces it, or the Formschneider in this case, is Nicola della Casa. Then there's who publishes it, who's the printing house, and then somebody might even hand color it. It's in this century that you really do start seeing the print becoming a commodity for so many different levels of society, different aspects of society, from just, ooh, there's cool art happening in Italy. I live in Antwerp and I want to know what it looks like. And that's all going on. So then it also creates this idea of what is a print workshop? And one of the things I would dearly love to do is to collect the various printmaking manuals. Like Bossa is one of the very first, where you get to see what a print shop looks like. There's a guy that's got his, pushing things through the star wheel press, and you see off to the side there's somebody else wiping the plate and somebody else daubing and the print's all hung over a line. That concept of the print workshop is a new industry. So it's not just, oh, I'm Parmigianino and I dashed off this entombment. It's going to become a commodity, a really impressive one. And the one,
this is the only place you're getting images yet.
Yeah. Especially if you were in the Protestant realms, then
right.
But yes, either you see stuff at church on a sign, maybe you're lucky enough to be able to read, but how many books are you going to be able to get? Right? That doesn't mean that there aren't small books like The Dance of Death. Holbein's Dance of Death is out there, and the literacy rate is rising, but still, to have access to this kind of artwork, or even see it on a broadside. There's one that's wonderful that is about people suffering the difficulties of their time, and even suffering the yoke of this time. It's a broadside that was posted on the sides of buildings during the Reformation, which is showing that the hares are starting to hunt the hunters and stringing them up. Prints as visual data, imagery, the things that force ideas through. To me, it's super exciting time, and so I'm starting to figure out a little bit more about the reproductive print because I want to,
Right.
It's just a much more interesting. And then if you think about how important reproductive prints are for the spreading of our history, not oftentimes, virtually every semester, when I'm teaching art history, I start talking about Winckelmann as the father of Western art history, blah, 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 blah. He wrote The History of the Art of the Ancients in 1764. And there's a portrait of him, and he's sitting there looking terribly proud of himself. And he's got prints sitting in front of him because he's never been to Greece or Rome, but he wrote about them and he wrote the first history. It's because somebody made prints of those things. And I enjoy that enormously. It's just what prints can do to blow the minds of people. So, we've got this kind of engraving going on. And in some places you'll see that, I believe it's Holtz that says something like the North was drowned in reproductive engravings because of their intensity of interest in Italian art. And one sure way to know about that was that there's a guy named Giorgio Ghisi, who had been working obviously in Italy, who is picked up by a fellow named, my favorite name.
Your favorite.
Go ahead, you can say it.
Hieronymous Cock.
That's right. So he's not from around here. He's from Antwerp. And Hieronymus Cock was actually a pretty darn capable artist on his own, a printmaker as well. But he had been working, Hieronymus Cock had been in Rome from 1546 to 1547. And so he's down there, he's seeing what's going on, and he sees this fellow named Giorgio Ghisi, and he's aware of the northern interest in Italian art, and he hires Ghisi, and he drags him up to Antwerp. And it's Ghisi that trains all of these new engravers in Hieronymus Cock's print shop, in his publishing house, how to engrave the Italian way. And Ghisi is taken up there in 1550. So basically, the print publishing house that Hieronymous Cock creates is the largest and most successful publishing house of prints in Northern Europe. And by one source, it said that he had published 1,100 prints by the time he had died in 1570, which I think is an amazing thing when you realize the level, the caliber of what he's doing, and also just how freaking smart he is to understand, like, okay, what are these guys going to want? Because he's not just having Ghisi train both Northern artists how to do the Italianate looking things, but he's also smart enough to get in other engravers like Cornelius Cort or Philip Gall, who would be doing engravings of Bruegel, who I'll have to be talking about next time because I adored Bruegel. But that's a totally different kettle of fish, completely different looking kind of engraving. Hieronymous Cock is like, okay, I see what is needed here. And he puts it together. He gets the engraver up there. And the first thing he does to get folks excited about this Giorgio Ghisi fellow that he's brought up is Ghisi comes up and he unveils his engraving of Michelangelo's Last Judgment, which predates Nicola della Casa's.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it's kind of weird. It's just a partial, but it's really something you see what they can go, ooh, this guy knows what he's doing. And the thing that he does for sure that we can really have fun chewing into is Giorgio Ghisi's engraving after, and I say after Raphael's School of Athens, because he didn't just reproduce the School of Athens. Remember that the School of Athens is in the papal apartments, and it's a huge lunette. It's 23 feet across.
Oh.
Maybe 27.
Yes.
It's a lunette.
Yes.
It's not, as my student said on an exam, a small painting done at night. A lunette is a half moon shape. It's half a circle.
Yes, he's added the rest of the rectangle.
Well, I got all this copper. Why don't we just dress this all the way out to the edges, right?
Right.
And so it's no longer in an arched shape, but he pays attention to the architecture and he sets it up with linear perspective like Raphael did. And it's still got the Apollo on the left-hand side, which is, the world of music and the kind of cosmological Leonardesque ideas. And on the right side, you've got Minerva or Athena, the goddess of righteous war and the arts, and all of the sort of left brain thinkers, the architects and the mathematicians, Bramante and all of those fellows. He's giving this Raphael composition. He's giving it to us. What are you noticing, print collector of this brand new School of Athens that was created by Giorgio Ghisi? First of all, you're impressed because it's big, right?
Yeah.
It's a nice size. We could almost say it's easel size. It's 20 inches tall by 32 inches wide. So that's a really good front room kind of size. It's not like I'm just going to shove this in a drawer. It's made from 2 plates. It's 2 joined sheets of paper.
Right. This one, the one that we're looking at, is from the Royal Collection in the UK, and you can definitely see the join.
But it also attests to how well Giorgio Ghisi has lined his plates up, and it is he's really done a fine job of restating the disegno of how Raphael has put all of the greatest intellects from the ancient world. That's why it's called the School of Athens. You got the 2 fellas in conversation. You got Aristotle and Socrates squabbling about which is more important, the earthly or the terrestrial, right? And I think people must have been pretty excited that Aristotle is portrait of Hercules. Well, he was Hercules. Of Leonardo, right? And then another Ninja Turtle. Raphael basically signed the painting by putting his own little self-portrait in the lower right-hand corner. Raphael is this little sweet face peeking out over here.
I see.
After he'd been working on the School of Athens, simultaneously, there's this big crabby guy that's painting a ceiling in an adjacent chapel.
Yes. And he's looking very melancholic here.
Very melancholic. That's the very pose. And that's as Heraclitus, and leaning on this sort of, but that was added, supposedly that was added later. Essentially, if you cover him up with your finger, you can see that whole composition holding together. He added Heraclitus and quite possibly the figure that's draped across the steps. Because Raphael was so much younger, I know he was tiptoeing across the way, peeking in at what Big Mike was doing, and looking at this guy who's already a god in his own time. And you can actually see Raphael's factor change just a little bit. The other part that's adorable is that he puts this panel with all kinds of information in the lower left-hand side.
Right, but they also like the main sort of signature is right underneath where Michelangelo is frustrated. But then there's
Michelangelo is frustrated.
But then there's this big piece of information on the writing on the left, but it's not integrated into the scene at all.
No, and you know why? Is because in the actual composition, that's a doorway.
Oh, hilarious.
So he used, there's a square form there, so I'm going to put all this Latinized stuff.
Right at the door.
And as you say, what did you say? Michelangelo's busy looking what?
Frustrated.
And he's leaning on this thing on the Michelangelo part.
Right.
It says Raphael Urbino invented Georgius Mantuus invented, fecit, made it, carved it.
Yeah.
So it's Giorgio Ghisi of Mantua. It's
cheeky.
It's cheeky. It's the fulcrum of the whole freaking image, right under Michelangelo's elbow, as though he's looking like, "Who made this? Not me." It's just, it's really freaking hilarious if you think about it, but it's astonishing also if you look at the scale, how well captured the sense of the human figures are. They don't look like dolls. They're in proportion. If you squint, soften your gaze. And you can see the sculptural quality that Raphael gave these figures when he was painting them in fresco on the wall of the Pope's apartments.
And this is a perfect example of you don't need color.
Oh God, that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, it's a great black and white class picture of the School of Athens. All the great philosophers, even politicians, have shown up, and there they are. This whole image had been created. They looked over the Pope's shoulder as he signed important documents, so that the Pope had the idea, the intellect was being channeled from the School of Athens through him onto whatever he's signing here in the Stanza della Signatura, in the room of the signatures in the papal apartments. And this is all Julius II. Same dude that, commissions Mike to do the ceiling and says, let's build a new St. Peter's. And so to have this be something that Ghisi is like, hey, Giorgio, come on up to Antwerp. I got to show you a thing or two. My name's Hieronymous Cock. I'm going to put you to work. You're going to train my engravers, and you're going to show them how to do things in the Italian way. And they're going to go, oh, yeah, that's cool. Oh, okay. Yeah, you bet. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic, really. So imagine this big hotshot star coming up, and the first thing you show them is the School of Athens. That's pretty fantastic. Well, that's Ghisi, but he's a reproductive printmaker. One last little thought about this School of Athens. It's one of the very first things that Giorgio Ghisi engraves when he gets up to Antwerp, which is 400 miles to the north of where he's been working. I mean, that's over the Alps. And think about how, that's just
We're still walking.
Yeah, or maybe you get a horse. Ooh, maybe a horse and maybe a cart, but it's still going over some freaking Alps, right? Now, he's done this wonderful thing, and yet he's also, Ghisi is giving us other things. He's showing off. Now, he's given us Raphael, and we know that Raphael and Michelangelo already have status equal to nature and to antiquity by this stage in 1550. They are big stars. Yes, Raphael's dead, and yes, Michelangelo was on the second half of his life, which was 2 lifetimes long. But, these folks are the big dealio. But he's also able to do reproductive prints of a few other things. For instance, we have Raphael as a perfect example of the High Renaissance. One of the things that we enjoyed showing our students was Giorgio Ghisi's reproductive print after Bronzino.
Oh, right.
It's a nativity. And I actually have this right here from 1553. And it's an enormous engraving if you think about it. I remember it as being huge. Here I have that it's 25 inches tall by 17 inches wide. It's a very large engraving. And here's another perfect example of not necessarily needing color.
Right.
In fact, this has got even more light-dark contrast than the School of Athens, which kind of makes sense. Now, Bronzino is a very Mannerist artist. He's somebody that I just really adore.
Best known as the painter, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Amazing portraits.
Amazing portraits with these ridiculous, elegant hands, like the Bronzino portrait of Medici that you were pulling up, but also of quirky images that are about art. He's the dude that made Venus, Cupid, Folly, and Time, that thing that I turned into a woodcut, which is probably some of the most salacious art you'll see in the in the 16th century, because Venus and her son Cupid are, well, doing more than just kissing. And Cupid, who is now about 11, has definitely checking out mom's chesticle.
Oh.
And Father Time has just pulled the drape off the scene. But it's these smooth, elegant figures. They're stunning. And the way the light and the brightness of these figures is affected is just alarmingly beautiful. Well, here we have Ghisi doing a Bronzino nativity. And I'm wondering, what do you think, Anne? What are you noticing about this that would make it seem like it's a Mannerist kind of a nativity, as opposed to, let's say, a Raphael High Renaissance one?
Well, yeah, we've got, I don't know who these people are, but everyone's sort of twisting and turning and talking to each other. And where's Joseph? Maybe that's him.
I think it is. Yeah. In fact, he's looking a little better off than sometimes. Usually Joseph is sitting there just going, what the heck just happened?
Right.
And here he's looking actually quite elegant. You can even see his kneecap through his... It's really a showcase of feet and hands and faces, isn't it?
Oh, there's a bagpiper. Weird. And then, but then it's all thrown off because the manger, the roof of the barn is off to the right, and it throws everything off. It's weird.
Well, it is. Well, it throws it off, but it also does that thing where it whips everything that's the outer edge.
The circle.
So even so, as we work our way around it, I think what's fascinating is how Ghisi has managed to translate the heavenly glow of the star, which just looks like it's so sharp. I mean, they're just the dagger-like.
It's almost like a cartoon version of...
I suppose we could say it's almost a caricature of light.
Right.
But then these little puto are so busy putoing. I mean, they're kind of whipping around in every possible shape, and these bulky clouds, and it's got that awkward imbalance but elegance that you expect from Mannerist things, and Mannerist art is going to continue to grow more and more extra muscles on men.
Right.
In fact, this I don't know if that's supposed to be a shepherd, or maybe he's brought some myrrh or something, and he's looking at the little baby, who, thank goodness, is an Italian baby, not a little scrawny Flemish one. But it's just remarkable in terms of the clarity of the form. It's even in this, there's a coolness to it. When you look at a Raphael nativity, or a Madonna and Child, there's a cuddliness to it. And I just feel as though everything here, look at Mary. She's almost looking askance at this baby, like, what is that thing?
Well, and then the character on the far left, next to the bagpiper, is looking off stage there, like not even entranced by the coming of the new Savior. He
looks like a direct copy of one of the Agnudi of Michelangelo from the Ceiling of the Sistine. He just happened to show up and be in that head backwards look, right?
Right.
Maybe as though he's inviting in the shepherds or the bagpiper?
The bagpiper.
I mean, they must have come from quite a distance, if you think about it. And there's the angel. Look at the angel behind Mary going, see, there's the star. See? It's wildly elegant. It's huge. It's got tons of light and dark.
What's the secondary star light thing going on back there?
The far upper left. It kind of almost feels like that might be a prior episode. Like there's the Holy Spirit going zipping.
Oh, the Visitation or something.
Yeah, like and here's my favorite part though. The ox has kind of got his head tilted, and he's kind of like, huh? It's usually you just see him in profile or maybe from the front, but this one's really rotated his head. He's like, huh? It's just quizzical, but it's also stunning. I mean, there's so much in there. Why wouldn't you want to own such a thing? And of course, this is, and by the way, Agnolo Bronzino was called Bronzino. He was known as Bronzino because he was the little copper-colored artist.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. He just was a little darker than some of the other artists in the area.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do we know where he was?
He's actually...
His heritage was...
I think he's still from the area, but...
Just a swarthy, olive-skinned something. And this ring of Puto remind me of the Mantegna ceiling.
Very good. Yes, indeed. It's as though, Bronzino was showcasing all
taking
of
up all sorts of.
Yeah, I was like, I can do this. Look at, I can do this. No, I can do this too. Look. But here he is, Ghisi is trotting this out in 1553 or 4 for Hieronymous Cock for the audiences all the way up in Antwerp. Now, Giorgio Ghisi was also very adept. He was a reproductive engraver. His job is to translate. Ghisi is tremendously important in being able to translate various artists and creating a way to make their oil paintings, their frescoes, read as a worthwhile graphic image, in black and white. He also gives us a window on what's happening in terms of style. And one that we would bring out for our students that always got so much play that we loved was Giorgio Ghisi's interpretation of the Hercules victorious over the Lernaean Hydra.
Oh, my head. I'd forgotten about that one.
So we've seen him take on Raphael. We've seen him do Bronzino, showing us some of this Mannerist wonderfulness that's coming along. And now we're going to see Ghisi do a restatement of Hercules victorious over the Lernaean Hydra, which was a painting by Giovanni Battista Bertani. And this he trots out in 1558. It is definitely something that was published through Hieronymous Cock in Antwerp. It was purportedly the frontispiece of a book about Vitruvius. It shows off Ghisi using engraving and stipple, but there are several reasons why this image was so remarkable to the students. And you, Anne, might remember pulling this out. Do you happen to recall any expressions of surprise when we pulled that one out?
I'm going to guess it has to do with breaking the frame here with the Lernaean Hydra's claws.
Is that not the most chunky, wonderful thing you've ever seen?
It's great.
It's an engraving. You expect to see a rectangular format, but this is so Mannerist.
But it's 15 by 9, right?
Yeah. And so he literally has shaped this part of it comes out of the box of the frame. The claw of the Lernaean Hydra is broken the fourth wall and coming into our world on the lower right-hand corner of this image. Now, that's not all, though. It's just, we've only mentioned a claw. What else are we seeing, Miss Anne? Tell us more.
Well, the Lernaean Hydra, which seems to be a dragon-y thing with lots of teats there, is kind of prone, laid back. You can't see the head or anything, but you see these amazing teats.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. The one tail of it is wrapped around Hercules' right leg. Now move up the figure. Hercules is victorious. We know he's victorious. He's standing over this thing. He's managed to kill it.
Oh, yeah, the 20-pack.
Yes, he's holding his club, but a 20-pack. And I'm not exactly sure if those are moobs, because those are like Terry Crews pecs.
They are.
And he's got like
his hip flexors have pecs.
And then the area around his navel looks like it could crack nuts. I mean, it's look how deep that indentation. Hercules got so many extra. It's like, you need to check Vesalius. No, actually, you're a Mannerist artist, or you're doing whatever Mannerist artists do, which is beef up those figures so that they're beefy beyond beefy. And even though he's in a contrapposto stance, look at even his neck is like kind of like, hey, check me out. Kind of like at the beach, almost like what's his name?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That guy. Yeah, I was going to say Schongauer, but it wasn't the right one. And he, when he's all pumped up, I'm, Mr. Universe, and I'm going to, and he's like, oh, and he look at his shoulders. He's evenly curled it over. He's got that one hand curled under to pop the extensors and flexors in his lower arm. I mean, he's at maximum, but he's looking cash, baby.
Well, in his face, he looks like he's much older than his body would indicate.
Indeed. But wise enough, he's learned a lot from some of his other victories, his trials, his labors. He's wearing a crown of oak leaves. He's victorious. And it's really surprisingly 3D. He's portrayed in a niche, a very dark niche, and you can see his shadow against it. And surrounding the niche that he's standing in are all kinds of, terrestrial globes and celestial globes and instruments, all of these different attributes of the arts. But by far, the most striking part of this image, aside from Hercules' abdomen, is the Lernaean Hydra at the bottom.
Right.
The Lernaean Hydra is a snaky thing, and it's got what look like breasticles, like many of them. And it's definitely been quelled. It's laying on its back. It's got nasty claw-like feet. But the thing about the Lernaean Hydra, this was a real problem for Hercules. You had to beat this Hydra. You had all of these things where you had to get smart and figure out what to do. Well, in the case of the Lernaean Hydra, he kept trying to kill it, but it had 7 heads. So he's decapitating it, right? And the Hydra is like Satan, of its time. And he keeps cutting these heads off, and they keep growing back, which is really frustrating. And so finally realizes, oh, okay. So he cauterizes, when he hacks the heads off, he cauterizes the neck stub with a torch, which is fine. But he gets to the last head on this Lernaean Hydra, and it is immortal. And he cuts it off, and he buries it under a rock. And he dips his arrows in the creature's poisoned gall and its spit and blood, and uses that on the tips of his arrows for some of his other zesty projects in the future.
Oh.
So the Lernaean Hydra has been bested here, and he's looking pretty pleased with himself. But literally the idea of cutting the copper plate to have that foot stick out, it's really stunning.
Mm-hmm.
It's showcasing absolutely everything that an artist could know about mythology, that you could know about bringing to life this vision of a satanic form out of Greek mythology. And because by now, of course, mythology is tremendously popular all over Europe, even Northern Europe, because, well, hell, you got all these great prints coming up with this stuff, right? Good job, Giorgio. It's got wonderful light and dark contrast, but some of the students in their final projects, there are a couple great takeoffs on this particular one. Students always seem to enjoy images with saggy, saggy titties. Yes, saggy titties or head stumps.
Head stumps.
There's that one we'll talk about. That's the companions of Cadmus that are devoured by, and that one's got a stumpy headed. Yeah,
right.
It's exactly the same time. It's so mannerist, weird, arcane, peculiar. You kind of sit there and like, what are you supposed to that mean? And you can just see people looking at this in the frontispiece of the book, going, and it's of the highest quality. And it's like, way to go, Giorgio, you win. Right?
Yeah, he deserves more props than he gets.
I think so, and that's why you're being beleaguered with this. The last part I wanted to mention about our buddy Giorgio was that he did an entire series in the 1570s, well, leading into the 1570s, of the various prophets and sibyls that were on the second level leading to the ceiling of the Sistine ceiling. When you look at the Sistine Chapel, there are 3 different strips. The lowest one in the dark areas are the ancestors of Christ. Like if you were to look at a full image of the Sistine ceiling, like in a color reproduction, you'd realize that Michelangelo was so smart that in the lower arcs, these lunette shapes, are all of the ancestors of Christ, like people that had families, like, the begats and the begittens. And then above them, in the kind of the pendentive wedges leading to the large part of the upper ceiling, are all of the prophets and the sibyls that foretold the coming of Christ. And they're so Michelangelo-esque. This is Michelangelo at the height of the High Renaissance. We're talking 1508 to 1512. These figures are massive. They're enormous. They're at least 4 times life size. And realizing also that they were on a curved ceiling in proportion, in fresco. You get one shot at getting it right, or you have to chip down the plaster for the day. And that just the sibyls and the prophets of the Sistine ceiling would be enough. And I think, if you had to have a piece of the Sistine, you can't really do the whole top where you have the creation of the deluge and all of the Adam and Eve. What could you focus on? And here we have a beautiful example of that. What do you think?
Well, it's sort of, without having all of the action scenes, you have everything kind of focused in on one set of characters with some supporting characters. And it's clear that it's Michelangelo. If you know anything about the Sistine ceiling, you'll know it's the Sistine ceiling. Like it's like it's like a partial postcard-y thing.
Yeah. And again, see how incredibly wonderfully sculptural the figures are. So he does actually the prophet Jeremiah, the Persian Sibyl, the Libyan Sibyl is my favorite, the Eritrean, the Delphic Sibyl, the prophet Ezekiel. We actually had several of those at the BMA, and so you put 8 or 9 of these together, and it would be this marvelous frieze that you could put up in your home. And in one place, they had been printed on silk.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So imagine, each of them are, what are they, something like 20 inches by 17 inches. So again, this magnificent frieze, a strip that, you could actually put them all around the top part of the ceiling of a room in your home and be so phenomenally pleased because you've got this massive figure that is a prophet. That means you need to look into your mythology or what the prophets in the Bible had to say. And then you also notice that it gives us tastes of all of the fictive architecture that Michelangelo had painted as well, because behind, I love this particular one. He's just so stunning. Which one is it?
Jeremiah.
Oh, Jeremiah, looking down, sort of Michelangelo-esque. Mm-hmm. And behind him are Puto supporting a cornice. All of this is fake painted architecture on a curved ceiling. And, Ghisi is able to render it flat on a piece of copper, but it's giving us all that light and shadow, and it's really stunning. So you can imagine having a whole crop of these. Some of my notes say 1540s, and that makes perfect sense that he would have made a whole string of these, at least 14 of them. Seeing them line up, in a way, it has that same impact as the lining up of the landscape behind all the muscle men.
Oh, right.
Like that through story. It really ties the room together, So Ghisi was a very adept fellow that taught a lot of guys to do what they have to do. He's making these while he's working for
Cock.
Very good, for Hieronymous Cock in Antwerp. Well, Hieronymous Cock by this time had created, the most powerful publishing house for prints in Northern Europe. Cock dies in the 1570s. And what I think is really lovely is that Cock had been working on this, what is it called? It's a compendium of the great artists of Lower Germany, essentially. And it was going to be kind of a northern Vasari, if you will. And it had images of various artists. He had portraits that he himself had engraved. Portraits.
That Hieronymus Cock engraved?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Of Hieronymus Bach, of Roger van der Weyden, of Kenton Massey's, Lucas van Leyden, Peter Bruegel the Elder, and 22 different portraits of these great
men.
Artists of the Northern Germany, because of course, it's called Effigies of Some Celebrated Painters of Lower Germany.
Huh.
But he died in 1570, but his wife published it in 1572. But I think it's very sweet that, in a way, it's like, and this is me, and then and he lives in the castle of but he died, but it gives us a really important record of the respected artists, and it also shows, again, that sense of the cult of genius, of recognizing artists and wanting to know more about them, because under each of the portraits there was a Latin passage about how important they were. They were mentioned in Carol van Mander's history of that part of the Europe in 1604 and so on and so forth. So he was an important figure in getting across the idea of artists north of the Alps being worth more than spit. So that's our buddy Hieronymous Cock, but we'll have to learn a little bit more about him.
Well, he kind of comes in and out, doesn't he?
Well, he does, but the thing about Cock is that he creates this publishing house called, well, okay, Anna, you read this because you've had French. Au quatre vents.
Au quatre vents.
Ooh, I did pretty good.
Oui, oui.
Or you could say in die vier winden.
The four winds.
Yeah. The House of the Four Winds.
Right.
And you wonder why he would have called that. I've got to do more research. But he's collecting things from all of the four corners of the European world. And he is the most prominent print publisher working in a Catholic counter-Reformation area. Which also, it would be worth finding out more about, aside from the mythological things he's doing and the great artist's greatest hits. What's he doing in terms of pushing the Catholic Church, or is he?
Right.
And so he's there, and I just wanted us to be aware of how well and how wildly this Italian stuff spread. But I wanted to finish with one other guy.
Okay.
And we're really fond of him because this was another one that the students always got totally juiced about when we'd bring him out. Not just because it's kind of the end of the lesson for today, but also because of the 4 prints that we know by this artist named Federico Barocci. 3 of them are reproductive, and 1 of them is autographic. And which would you rather do, the autographic or the reproductive first?
I love both of those prints. So.
Well, then let's do the repro.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. You tell me why you love it.
Gorgeous.
The students loved this one. They would do their drawings or their visual analyses after it, or even their final project. So here we have Federico Barocci, our last Italian dude.
Yeah, he's the engraver of said thing?
Yeah, he's an engraver, but the last one we'll talk about is an etching.
Right.
Because he puts it all together, literally. The Annunciation that you're looking at right there, he did about 1584, maybe to 1588. We don't quite know the date. It's not dated. But it is a combination of etching and engraving.
Oh.
It's big.
Yeah, you can totally see that because engravings they start having a really sort of regimented kind of pattern thing going on, and this one is like, I don't know, it's not as autographic as the next one, St. Francis, but it's definitely between the two.
Yeah, let's talk about the St. Francis because then it'll make so much sense as to why you can see what he's done. St. Francis receiving the stigmata, St. Francis in ecstasy. It's one source says that it's an etching and engraving. To me, it looks like just an etching. It's done about 1581. It's not terribly big. It may be like 5 by 7 inches, not terribly big at all, but it's really stunning. It's so fresh, and it's pure experimentation with what etching can become. I think it is a harbinger of some of the really remarkable things that will be happening with etching in the next century. Certainly, were Rembrandt to have seen this, you could see how it would have had a deep impact on him. So here we have my hero, St. Francis, essentially having fallen to his knees, and he's been presented to us kind of at a tilt, so that he's looking with wonder up into the sky, and what he is seeing is the crucifixion of Christ, and he receives the stigmata, the 4 wounds on his hands and his feet, and the one in the side of the spear that was jabbed into him by Saint Longinus, to make sure, is he dead yet? Well, here's Saint Francis, who's died in the 13th century, receiving the stigmata. He's become so at one with that faith system. And Anne's got a beautiful reproduction of it here pulled up.
This is from the Art Institute of Chicago's website.
And it's etching done in a new way, because it's not just a one-hit wonder.
No, you can see that there's been several hits in the acid.
At least 2.
At least 2.
And so where does he want us to look? Where's our attention supposed to be?
Well, clearly on him. I mean, you go right to him because
he's the darkest.
He's the most dark, right?
The most fully rendered, if you will.
Yeah, everything behind him in the middle ground and background is clearly a single hit because it's so much lighter.
It's hazy, but
markedly lighter.
Yeah, and so here's an artist who's doing timed biting, doing at least 2 hits. He's described the entire plate, put it in the acid. Maybe the whole thing was bitten with the church background, the trees, and this other figure in the middle distance has actually got a little bit of both in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the second time in, he worked up the hatching on St. Francis really even more, so that we just are totally able to share in that remarkable moment. Look at his sweet face, is absolutely at the center of an X if you were to draw it in this plate.
Well, and he's gone into the tree trunk or rock behind him on the left, which is a complete arrow right into the center of St. Francis.
Exactly. I mean, that's some of that, residual Titian-esque kind of exciting, prefiguring Baroque. Even the tree is essentially putting brackets around saying you need to look right here.
Right.
But it's so fresh and it's so understated.
Mm-hmm.
It's
in former times he would have been face front. You would have seen the transfigured whatever on what's that expression on his face.
He would have been transfixed, but he would have just been. It would have been a roadmap. Like Saint Francis on an icon. It would have been absolutely like a road runner run over, facing boom, or maybe in profile. But here he's been tilted slightly upward. Look at the glorious foreshortening on that hand.
The hand, his left hand is amazing. It's sort of pointing backwards towards the little town and the person who's walking back there.
And then that sweet little face and the stippling of it.
Yeah.
It's not line. It's just so lovingly done.
It's sort of Rembrandtian.
Exactly. But he's 50 years early.
Right.
So he's the first one of our etchers, Italian etchers, that is like, oh, if I did this in a couple bites in the acid, I could get these effects. And if you look at towards the bottom, you can really start seeing him build up the hatching. Even look at how he directs us to the stigmata hole in the palm. It's just really stunning. And there's no excess line. Everything that's there is necessary, but there's nothing, way too much of anything. It's just delightful. Even the little flowers that are sketched in the midground, they're just so, they're pieces of nature, and the kind of nature that St. Francis wanted us to notice, to pay attention to be kind to, that the animals are God's creation as much as, anything else.
And the other really, which I had not thought of till just this moment, as things happen, that this other monk that's walking back towards the little town has no idea what is happening.
Not
and
a
so
clue.
There's like this super, I am at one with God, no intercessor person.
Correct. It's an absolutely, at this moment, it's completely private. And it's like, we get to be there. And I don't even feel voyeuristic when I see this, it's just, you encounter it, and there's something almost.
And his pose is it's totally welcoming. It's I am on the cross and getting stigmata, but also welcome world.
Indeed, absolutely right. And it's look at that one pushing back, one pulling forward, like reaching to us.
And come on, let's go on.
Yeah. And it's just astonishing how, I sometimes say, big ideas in small packages. To me, absolutely Rembrandtesque there. You've got things very diffuse in the background, and just letting us really focus on what is absolutely essential, but also that he's a man of nature. Yeah, and it's, I never managed to really see it. It's way up there. I have never, you guys get to live in the land of great digital reproductions.
Seriously. You can go in really close on this Art Institute of Chicago site, and up in the upper center there is a, I think, a dove, but in the shape of somebody on a cross.
Yeah.
With sort of the spectral light coming out, emanating from him, her.
And it's interesting because I would have thought, I would have pictured it out here.
Well, you would think he was looking at it. So
right.
And he's not.
No, and it's dead center at the top, which, of course, when we're showing prints upside down to students, there's no way I would have seen that. I'm too busy blah, 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 blah. And, it's even wonderful that he's put Federico Barocci. I've made this.
He signed it, yeah.
And I love that. He signed it with 4 letters, but it's just, it says, beautiful. I meant to do this. And it's the most lovely, autographic. I would totally live with this. And so it does let us know that there's the autographic, wonderful, quiet, contemplative. But then let's go back to the one that you enjoy, which is also Barocci. Right. And it's an Annunciation. It's really stunning. And students would go gaga for both of these.
Right.
And to me, I think it's wonderful to see the ones that would get them just riled up. And why do you suppose this one?
The images that you see of the Annunciation, the angel is honoring Mary in a way that you don't often see. Usually the angel's sort of coming from on high and saying, you're the chosen one. And
something's coming.
This one is just so gentle.
Yes.
And you don't know, it looks like there's an interior going on here. There's a table and a window, but then this, whatever all this is, looks like a rocky outcropping to me.
Almost like the foreshadowing of the cave or the ruggedness of the outdoors. But clearly we're looking through a window behind her that has that same very gently bitten, faint city behind her. And of course, Mary got impregnated at a time that had castles behind it.
This looks more like engraving to me than etching.
Well, and it's both.
Etching than engraving.
But it's both. That's the point. And that's the beauty of this one, because he does use the etching, and then to really punch in certain things, he uses the Buren.
Right.
And that's something that Rembrandt will also do. He'll go in with the Buren to strengthen certain areas and make them even darker and crisper.
Right.
And so, this kind of lovely light that's coming from the top, that's the kind of light you get with some etching, with a gentleness to it. Because with a Buren, things are they're there. And my God, that face, it's just
She's beautiful.
absolutely lovely.
She's sort of like the beautiful Raphael-esque Mary.
Hooded eyelids, but there's something even more.
She's already got her halo. I mean, she hasn't even been impregnated yet.
And look at that beautiful braided hairstyle.
Yeah.
And she's been reading, and she has, I am the handmaiden of the Lord. That hand that's receiving it, honestly, that hand that's raised like that, it's the same kind of hand that Louis Lenan would use to have a candle behind, in another 40 years.
Yeah.
But the way she's putting the book down on the table is so very sweet. You see the angel.
And she's not surprised.
No, she's not. And she's not even like, oh,
you've interrupted me. She's like, oh.
I am the handmaiden of the Lord. It's like, okay. In art history, you look at so many, and there's so many where she's like, oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
And but this one is just such an invitation. It's like, oh, that's what I was intended to do. It's just really stunning. And then the angel, just this welcoming sort of, and this is going to happen, and here's a lily that shows how pure you are and will remain, and the wider world is behind. It's out that window, like that Renaissance window. It's out there. It's not here. We're here in this moment. Look at that wing. I never really had to focus on that.
Well, and also, I mean, they're obviously not the same person, but this could be a family member of, it's almost like you're looking at yourself.
Yeah, like there's some genetic data that's similar. Yeah. The kneeling of this angel is just, it's so gracious and sweet. There's nothing weird about it. It just makes sense. Even look at the bottom of the foot towards us. That's something that Rembrandt will use.
Yeah, lower right.
And normally you don't get to see angel feet because they're incorporeal. They don't have generally the bottom halves of their bodies, but it's as though this is truly happening. And then in the lower left corner, we have, it's a kitty. It
is a kitty.
I think it's just all snuzzled in and sleeping.
There's a lot of indebtedness to Dürer here.
Sure, but nothing as Dürer is not this tender.
Not this free or tender, for sure.
Yeah, there's just something so sweetly tender about it. Well, it's Italian. It's not German.
Right.
It's indebted, but it's not militantly so, because he's so inventive on his own. Now, here's the question. This is an etching/engraving done after a painting.
Right.
Is it autographic or is it reproductive?
Barocci did both.
Yes.
Can you be reproductive of your own image?
That's my question, because I reproduced my own big drawings as prints. Does that mean I'm being reproductive, or am I restating something in a different language?
Right.
That's why I always ended on this one, just to mess with them.
Right.
Because not only do you get to see that etching is like starting to open up, but you're seeing exquisite drawing. You're seeing, and in this print, you can see touches of the Buren in there. But it's just, there's an immediacy to it. There's a tenderness to it. It's really exquisite. And
there's stairs there.
You see,
right behind the lilies.
Very, very faintly so, indeed.
Huh.
So that's just the sweet, tender moment to end with, and to say etching's on its way, and engrave. It's the Annunciation with a view of Urbino through a window and a cat. Well, we know about the cat, but I don't know what the deal.
The British Museum is, on their website, is saying that the view through the window is of Urbino.
Well, then you could tell, because that very specific architecture.
Right, exactly.
Which again, it's like, this is happening in your world. The future, your savior will be born into this world. And when you think about 1581, how difficult the times were.
Yeah.
You're doing Catholic Counter-Reformation. You've got the Spanish Inquisition gathering steam. And yet you have this tender, safe, comforting image.
Right.
There's no Hercules. There's nobody that's in charge. There's just an acceptance, a delighted acceptance.
It's a remarkable statement from a man of a woman's calm,
of understanding it and going, yes, And it is. It's a guy that's done it, but it's appreciating the beauty, literally, as St. Francis would have had, appreciating all of these different kinds of beauty that exist in the world. And it seems to be a very thankful, it's an artist that's pleased to have these skills. I've never even needed to see the painting. I've always
right.
I've always been perfectly happy with the etching.
Right.
And I that's one I definitely live with.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I'm going to say it's better than the painting. There's no question.
I agree with you.
Oh my God. Anne's pulled up. Ugh. Indeed. So you will be able to see that there's a world of color in black and white.
Wow.
That drawing is a more immediate response, oftentimes more accurate instead of varnished, like you would varnish an answer to someone.
In the collection of the Vatican.
No.
The painting.
How about that?
Yeah.
See the things you get to learn with us? Yes, indeed. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Anne, for making me do this more.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're going more in depth on artists that I completely glanced over as we were talking about them in class. I mean, sometimes
you didn't have a choice.
I didn't hear anything because I was shuffling.
Good Lord. You're shuffle, and
yeah.
you're making it all, and then it all disappears magically too. And
right.
That's a big job, you and Ben. And
it was
how about the day that we were doing it, and it was some real tender, meaningful day. And the fire alarm went off.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, and you two were so sweet. You guys, they were like trying to put their coats over it and they couldn't get it to stop. And we knew that we only had but so much time in this room. And
well, I mean, the thing that
it was heroic what you guys were doing.
I know, but like if we had scheduled 6 visits for you at the BMA's print room or whatever room we had moved to. Yeah, we moved to the boardroom that year. If we had to cancel one or miss one, there was no way we could make it up.
No way at all. And because by then we were like fully engaged as a team, and because we'd already moved downstairs because the class had grown and we were trying to accommodate
too many people.
Well, we were forced, but
30 people is too many.
Yeah.
The prints are like 9 by 12. I mean, it's ridiculous.
On the little ones, but on these big reproductive guys, but you guys, they didn't get the Barbary. That's okay.
But
what's lovely is to think that these students would find, a restatement. They would do the Barocci, and it's so tender. It was so wonderful. Maybe I can find a gallery of some of the best.
That'd be cool.
Drawings done after I've got a couple sitting around.
Do you?
Oh God, I got a Bruegel that won't stop. I've got Piero McGowan, the guy that had never etched before.
Right.
He did a Rembrandt etching.
Yes.
But he also did a study of the 3 trees. Oh my gosh, I got a couple great 3 trees. So maybe we'll see if we can't pull those out.
That'd be fun.
You suppose we have to ask the artists?
Yeah, well, we'll get in touch.
Okay, fine. Let's do it.
All right, Piero. Give us a call.
All right. Well, thanks for letting us share with you.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoy your Barocci when you get to see it. It's way better than the painting.
Prince rule.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for joining me for Platemark, A History of Western Printmaking with the amazing Tru Ludwig. We really appreciate you tuning in. As always, I need to thank him for joining me on this crazy journey, and a special thank you to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. The images that Tru and I discuss in the episode are available to you over on the show notes, which is at platemarkpodcast.com. There's a couple of new features on the website, one of which is a little microphone icon that you can press and leave a message for us, asking questions, a comment, whatever you'd like. That would be cool. Give it a try. And then I think that's it. We will see you next time.